Let's talk about Smile 2, which we already reviewed. If you want to go check out that review, check it out. There's no spoilers here. Here, we're going to get straight into spoilers. Like, we're going to spoil everything about it. So if you don't want to do that, make sure you check out our review and then come back after you watch the film, because it is one of those films that I will tell you is probably in my top 5 of the year right now. Maybe. I need another rewatch, but we'll see. But this film basically was a direct sequel to Smile. When I say direct, this movie starts 6 days after the original Smile. So before we get into the ending and what comes next from Smile, make sure you're subscribed and hit the notification bell. Follow us on our Instagram because we are running a giveaway. We will be announcing that giveaway tomorrow only on Instagram. So make sure you go check us out on Instagram right now. I will leave it somewhere here, and make sure you follow us and stay tuned for that giveaway announcement. Now, let's talk about Smile 2, because this film basically takes place after Rose's demise at the end of the first Smile. As we know, Rose had the Smile curse on her in the first Smile. Eventually, we saw that she passed this on to Joel, and now we see Joel trying to pass this Smile entity curse, whatever it is, to a pair of criminals that are out on a hideout. Now, as we know, the only way the Smile curse can be passed on is if you are going to commit a horrible crime in front of somebody else, or eventually once the entity takes full control of you, it causes your suicide in front of somebody and then it passes on to that person. Joel's plan at the beginning is to kill one of the drug dealers in front of the other one to pass on the entity to the other one, because they're pretty much scumbags. And we see that he does this, but then he gets into a shootout with the other one, eventually causing him to die. And so that means that Joel still has the curse, because you can't have that person die. However, we see that he sees somebody else was looking on at what was going on, which was actually Lewis, and that's the character that is played by Lukas Gage. And he's just like, I won't tell nobody, but then eventually the other drug dealers here come and try to take down Joel. He flees, but then he's fatally run over by a truck. My goodness, this man did all of that for nothing, right? So pretty much Joel was able to pass on the curse and he was free, but then he was just hit out of coincidence and he's just dead now. And now Lewis has the curse. We jump over to New York City now. We meet pop star Skye Riley, who's trying to make a comeback after battling substance abuse and being in this very publicized relationship with her boyfriend, who ultimately died during a car crash they both had, Paul Hudson. And her mother, who is also her manager, Elizabeth, is trying to get her ready for her upcoming tour, as well as her assistant Joshua. We see that she is still trying to, however, get some drugs due to the pain that the accident has caused her. So she goes to find her drug dealer, Lewis, who we've already met already, and she sees that he's acting very erratic and she's getting frightened by him. But she also notices he's frightened by something that she can't see, but it seems to be something that's sort of plaguing him. Eventually, we see Lewis gets a weight and just begins to smash his face with it, which traumatizes Skye, but doesn't call the police because, hey, we can't have Skye Riley here being here with a drug dealer getting drugs and linked to his death, right? So she just pretty much gets out of there and just continues on with herself. See, as the pressure starts to mount for Skye for her comeback with her mother, with her agent, as well as with her assistant, and she's just really still trying to get over what happened to Lewis, but now the entity is plaguing her, making her have these hallucinations, witnessing these things that don't make sense. She decides to call her friend Gemma, who she hasn't spoken to in a year because they had a big falling out, and we see that she confesses what happened to Lewis and asks for Gemma to stay with her for a couple of days and sort of get her ready for everything that's to come. During this whole ordeal as well, with Skye battling the entity and its hallucinations, trying to get her tour together and just trying to get right with everything, we see that an unknown number has been texting her, knowing that she is the one that has the entity now and the curse. So she decides to meet with this unknown person. Turns out that this is a man whose brother was actually killed by the entity beforehand, and he's been tracking it ever since. He wanted to get a hold of Joel, but of course Joel died. Then he wanted to get a hold of Lewis, but of course Lewis died. And this is how he found out that Skye Riley was the next one, because he saw that the text that Lewis had sent to Skye, they were the last ones they were sent, and so that's the last person Lewis had any contact with. So now Skye is the one with the curse. He has a theory that he can kill the entity because he says it's a parasite that will die if it doesn't have a host. So my suggestion, he says, is to kill you, let the parasite die, and then we resuscitate you. And thus we get rid of the curse. But she's just like, you know what, that sounds crazy. I'm not doing any of this. And she leaves. However, later that night, Skye begins to hallucinate again, and the entity really comes in full circle and just strong as hell as ever, as the entity takes shape of these backup dancers for Skye Riley, and they beat her into a concussion. We see then that Skye Riley remembers everything that happened the night of her car crash with her boyfriend Paul, and we see that it was a thing where they were having an argument and they were fighting for the steering wheel, which they eventually led to them falling off of a sort of like hill or cliff, I believe, and that then caused the death of the boyfriend Paul. And so this is something that's been weighing on Skye a lot. If they weren't fighting and all of this, would Paul still be alive? And we then see Skye wake up in this facility that's meant to sort of get her better, like a rehab of sorts, and she is told that she needs to take some time, that she needs to start the tour pretty soon. And she's talking to her mother, and they start arguing after the mother says that she is being ungrateful and she needs to just do as she's told, because if not, they're going to get sued. They need to pay all of these millions, and she has to perform. Eventually, we see that the entity has taken a shape of Elizabeth, who is Skye's mother, and begins to use a sharp mirror shard to pretty much attack themselves and eventually kill themselves. Skye tries to flee, but then she discovers she's the one holding the shard, almost like she was the one who did this, right? So she escapes from the facility, and then she finds Gemma, who is going to drive her to the guy who's going to help her to try and break the curse now. But then Skye realizes that Gemma never came that night when she gets a call from Gemma, who's barely returning her text after all this time, and she asks her if she's been with her or gone to her house, which the real Gemma says, no, I've never been to your house. This is my first time contacting you in over a year. And as Skye turns, yes, that Gemma was never real. It was always the entity playing a trick on her. Skye then takes control of the car. However, when she realizes that she can sort of control her own mind and the entity doesn't have to, and she drives to meet Morris, who is the guy who's going to help her break the curse at an abandoned pizzeria. There we see that Morris has prepared everything, including having a freezer so that Skye Riley's heart and brain can stop but not really deteriorate or any of that. And they have 8 minutes to make sure that the entity is gone. He then leaves to get something, and we see that Skye is attacked by the entity, who takes the shape of her when she was in that car crash. Skye then attempts to just kill herself, but the entity overpowers her and locks her inside of the freezer. Says that they have been in control the whole time and there's nothing that Skye can do as they close the door. We find out the entity's actually closing Skye Riley in this like stage contraption that Skye is going to have for her tour. And Skye's actually at her tour opening, where we see that Darius, Joshua, and her mother Elizabeth are there amongst the crowd, as she is then confronted by a smiling version of herself, which then bursts out, and we see the entity from the first one, which looks a lot bigger. It was huge. I'm telling you, this scene was just incredible to see on the big screen. I want to watch it again. It was so intense. We then see that this being goes inside of Skye, and as she collapses, we see that then she gets up, now possessed, smiles at the crowd, and stabs herself to death with the microphone, passing on the curse now to Darius, Joshua, Elizabeth, and now the rest of the audience. So what an intense movie this really was, I am telling you. So the big question I guess we all have is, what was real and what was not real? So in my opinion, I think everything was real up until the point when she called Gemma. I think that everything beyond that probably wasn't that real for the most part. Like, there were probably some instances here and there, but of course anything with Gemma was not real. All of that was just pretty much make-believe. And I'm very curious to see any of the scenes with Gemma, because there were some scenes where Gemma was like sort of in the presence of other people. And I'm thinking about it, did she really even like have any like conversation with any of them, right? Like, I'm really trying to get that in my head if that did happen or not. So I think the thing here is that the entity was always able to manipulate Skye into whatever it wanted to think, right? And I think what the entity was doing was giving Skye this false sense of hope that she was able to sort of overcome this and be able to destroy the entity and all of that. And that got me thinking, was Morris real or not this whole time? And I gotta say, I think that Morris, for the most part, probably was real, but I think that by the end of it, Morris really wasn't there, right? Like that whole pizzeria thing, I don't think that was real at all. I think that Morris did try to meet up with Skye at a point, and I think this is why the entity saw what was going on and then elaborated this whole thing for Skye to think she had the whole thing figured out and was going to be able to stop it, because of course the entity feeds on Skye having these very dark and depressing thoughts. And I think what more depressing could it be for Skye to realize that she thought she had it under control and she didn't, and she never was going to. And I think that's just a dark moment there. So when Skye got the curse, that was when the curse started. Then, of course, we saw Skye start to hallucinate, see Lewis and things like that. I think that was real then. And then, of course, when she called Gemma up, that's when things were not real no more. And it sort of was just the entity trying to destroy Skye more and her psyche. And then by the end of it, we saw that the entity felt it was the right time to sort of continue the curse. And I think the entity was so like excited to have somebody like Skye, because they would be able to have a huge crowd to be able to showcase this too. So the big question does become, was Morris ever real or not? Which I think it could work either way. If you think he wasn't or wasn't, he definitely could be real in the beginning, but I think in that second time we see Morris at the Pizza Hut, that was just the entity in itself. Maybe they caught on to what Morris and Skye were talking about at the bar and was really pissed off about that, so wanted to give Skye this false sense of reality to make her think that there was a way out. And of course there wasn't. The entity was always going to be in control, and when Skye found this out, it could have sort of broken her psyche and character even more, so the entity really was able to do whatever they wanted to do because it feeds off of that. It got strong, and I think that's why we saw it so big by the end of the film, because there's so much it was feeding off of Skye Riley's pain. And so at the end, we see that Skye has now given the curse to everybody, her mother, her assistant, the head of the label, the thousands of people watching. And what if this was being live streamed? What if somebody had their phone out live streaming and they saw Skye Riley commit suicide on stage, now passing on the small curse to everyone? It has now become an epidemic of sorts and ultimately a pandemic, right? It is now going to be interesting to see what's Smile 3 could bring, which we actually have Parker Finn talking about it, talking to Games Radar by saying, I think there are so many different interesting directions the world of Smile can take, different roads it can go down. Right now, I'm very excited to see how audiences respond to Smile 2, and if we are lucky with how audiences can connect with and embrace the film, I think the sky's the limit. So I'm excited for that. I mean, Skye Riley, right? So you know what you think about the ending of Smile 2. So pretty much we saw Joel from the first movie try to pass on the Smile curse, as he learned the only way to pass it on as well was through using a way in which you murder someone in front of someone else. And that was actually something that we had seen somebody already be able to do and accomplish in the first Smile movie, which was actually the character of Robert Talley, who said that they were the ones who were able to break the chain. Somebody else apparently had did it in Brazil as well years prior, so that was something else we learned. But up until now, nobody has been able to break the curse. Skye Riley's plan with Morris didn't work, and now we see Skye Riley passing on the curse. We still don't know what the entity is or where it comes from. They call it cosmic, they call it a demon, but I'm very curious to see if Smile 3 wants to get more into that, and I'm excited for it. I really enjoyed this one. I'm excited to talk more theories about Smile 3, so stay tuned for that video later this weekend. But let me know what you thought about Smile 2 and its ending, and what do you think is going to happen now with thousands of people infected all over the world and thousands more getting infected even more? Where does this movie go? How does this movie end? Is it apocalyptic or what is it, right? Let me know in the comments down below what you would love to see. But make sure you follow us on our Instagram. Big giveaway announcement tomorrow, only on Instagram. So make sure you're following us over there. And as always, I'll see all of you next time on the road to 35,000 subscribers. Stay safe, stay positive.